Welcome to the AI and Faith podcast. We are a community of expert technologists, professionals, and faith leaders bringing the ancient wisdom of the world's major religions to the ethics of artificial intelligence. Join us on this new journey and welcome to the conversation. My name is Pablo Salmones, and I will be your podcast host. Today's episode is an interview with Peter McGowan and Craig Detweiler, which was recorded in February 2025. In this special episode, Craig and Peter interview themselves on the power of storytelling and creativity in the era of AI. Is AI shaping the way creative people work? How has storytelling affected our idea of artificial intelligence? Listen now to our conversation. We have two magnificent guests joining us. First of all, we've got Peter McGowan, and who's co-founder of Plain Joe and Storyland Studios. And he brings extensive experience in integrating technology, art, and architecture to create immersive stories for clients, including Disney, Universal, and Lego. And we also have Craig Detweiler, who is a noted author and cultural commentator and dean at Grand Canyon University. Now, he has recently published Honest Creativity, which explores the foundations of human innovation in an age of artificial intelligence. So, as you can see, we have two very, very creative minds here with us who will be interviewing each other about precisely that, about artificial intelligence, creativity, and storytelling as well in this large scale environment and experiential design. So thank you, Peter, Craig, for joining us. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Pablo. Peter, you've been world building before there was even a term called world building. Is that true?
Uh, Maybe, sure. I'm reluctant to say that, but yeah, we've been doing it for a while, for about 25 years now. But yeah, I think there were some pioneers even ahead of us that we've ridden on their coattails pretty well.
Has AI made your life easier?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I mean, going back to and working with friends over at Disney Pixar, I mean, being able to tell stories on the big screen, like with the leaves blowing in the wind. I mean, that was all done with machine learning, and yeah, it was not to tediously animate, leaf by leaf, and grass blade by grass blade in order to come up with things, or even water simulations, lighting simulations, all those things. It's all been machine learning, AI kind of powering all of that for the last couple of decades. But yeah, and then any sort of deep kind of mass customization, we've used inference engines for that for decades now.
I feel like, so I've been part of this group since some of its even early founding days. And there was a little bit of, I would say, a theoretical side of it at the time. It was like, it might be this way, it might be that way, it could be used this way. We're not quite sure. Obviously, now I think we're in this other moment, right, where it's being fully employed in lots of different fields. Um, do what you guys do at Storyland, and I've actually got some pictures maybe that would be worth pulling up for people. Um, you're manipulating the physical world, right? You're building physical spaces, but you're doing that using, all types of softwares to imagine this new world, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is. And I think Ted asked a question here. I'm looking at the text thread about like what is world building, and ultimately, when we come back to the idea of storytelling, foundations of stories, characters, plots, and settings. The setting is the world that we're placing people within, and understanding whether it takes place on a big screen or in a theme park, where a lot of our work is in physical environments and theme parks. We're building these worlds that people can immerse themselves into and kind of imagine that they're somewhere else. So yeah, there's a bunch of different applications of that, and we've had a lot of fun over the years. Yeah, the whole idea of getting people to suspend disbelief that they're in swampland in Florida, or in orange groves in Southern California, that they are in fact in in Hogsmeade with Hogwarts Express in the middle of winter when it's the sweltering heat of summer. It's a bit of fun, but
And what I like about what you do is you take sort of an imaginary world, right? Like Hogwarts,
Mhm.
and you're going to
Mhm.
actually build the physical train, right?
Hmm.
Figure out
Yeah.
what it would look like in a setting, right? And figure out how to
Hmm.
put that in Universal Studios, whether that's in, Florida or California. You're going to build, the actual space. You're going to
Yeah.
take a character like Sonic and then, put him in a, I don't know, a conference setting. So you're taking existing intellectual property and then figuring out how to make, well, I'll say the virtual, uh, tangible. Is that a
Yeah.
fair way to talk about it?
It is, it is, it is, and it's taking everything through that lens of the camera or the person experiencing the story, and understanding perspectives and what they see, the sight lines, and kind of bringing all those things together. But yeah.
When you're working for somebody like, Ubisoft or, Lego, right? They have very particular ideas.
Mhm.
How free do they let you be in imagining, spaces? Is that what you're bringing to it? You have existing characters or existing narratives, but then you can run a little bit wild.
Yeah, you know what? I think there's different phases of development. In the very first initial phase, we always try to bring it back, keep it in the high level, what we call blue sky, and we try to leave it open for brainstorming so that there are unlikely possibilities that could unfold. But then once we kind of hone in on the story, that then it really gets locked into that world that we're kind of defining within, and then we want to make sure we understand the canon of that world and make sure that we don't deviate outside that.
I think it's interesting and odd, right, that you're taking, I'll say things that quote unquote don't exist, right? You're taking
Mhm.
imaginative characters, 3D figures from, video games or animated properties, and then you're actually trying to drop them into the physical world. You're having to physicalize things that might be exist in a 2D or only in a virtual space, and then yet make it real. Even with this case where you're working for Nollywood, which some people might not even realize there's a huge, movie industry in Nigeria. So they've got their own ideas of how they want to, bring their movies, their worlds, their stories to life.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I think for us, it really is about this convergence of mediums and platforms, even if you go back to the Renaissance, Michelangelo wasn't just a painter; he was an architect, he was an engineer, he was a furniture maker. They were very multidisciplinary in how they worked, and a lot of our team, especially that comes from Disney, Universal, Lego, they love mixing mediums and bringing things together. So for us to bring, whether it's from big screen to television to video games to physical theme parks, it's fun to see the convergence of all these stories coming to life, and how do we bridge those gaps.
So you've also, you're doing it for, I'll call it, you're in a sense, you're entertaining uh, folks at a children's hospital, right? Where they might be there for some heavy realities, and yet you're trying to create an imaginative space that, enlivens their, I don't know, their notion of what's possible. Um, so it's not just necessarily, it's in many cases, it's just quote unquote escaping the world, but you're also helping people escape heavy realities that could be dogging their families.
Yeah, well, for us, it's actually a bit even deeper than that. For us, story is not just a form of entertainment. I mean, ultimately, I believe story is core to the human condition. It's how you connect with your friends. It's how you connect with your family. Culture is led by the storytellers. Often people, oh, what's the greatest story ever told? It's the story that you tell yourself, and in dealing with kids, especially that are going through incredibly tough times and hard things, it's pretty incredible to see these fantastic storytellers and these kids who are going through cancer treatment or been in these horrific car accidents or done all these things and going through rehabilitation. The stories that they tell are some of the most hopeful and powerful stories we've ever heard, and being able to just kind of bring a light to that, and how they then in turn inspire even the staff within Bethany Children's Health Center. So a lot of the storytelling we work on there, it ties directly into what we say is the story that is told internally, and then the story that is shared externally, and how they use that in their HR training and all those things. But it's not just, hey, let's bring a story so people can escape reality. They're in their reality and they're making their story come alive. It's pretty inspiring, actually, pretty humbling.
I think one of the wilder applications of what you guys have done at Storyland, you did this poverty
Mm.
encounter, right? Where you're actually trying to, um, I don't know, you're not exactly gamifying poverty, but you're trying to get people in proximity to maybe things that are beyond their world, beyond their experience. Um, what did you learn from a project like this? Like, here at AI and Faith, we're trying to get people in touch with the human experience, right? Not
Yeah.
lose their humanity a minute at all. And yet you're creating, I don't know, a virtual encounter with poverty. Like, was that a good experiment? Do you think that worked? Is that
Oh
helpful?
yeah, yeah, huge, huge. There was several different layers to it, and I think I really appreciate kind of growing up. My dad was in the army. We grew up army brats. First decade of my life was overseas, majority of the time in Europe. But that broader worldview context was pretty powerful for me. Walt Disney had a very similar experience. After World War I, he went to Europe, and what he had seen in Southern California is that people were so insulated from the rest of the world and what was going on. The whole idea of creating Disneyland, again, it wasn't just an escape, was to really broaden their perspective on what is possible even outside that little Southern California bubble. Um, but for the poverty encounter, they were already engaging with about 45,000 young kids from local schools every year coming through their facility to pack food boxes that would then go out into third world countries to provide healthy, balanced meals for these families. And what they realized over several years was these kids really had no context for how bad or what things were like. They might have seen downtown LA or down by the beach or something like that. But their context, because even the worst areas of America are way nicer than what's happening in Haiti after earthquake, or in the play fields of Nepal, where kids are having to make clay bricks that are then sold around the world, or the sewers in Guatemala. So being able to recreate some of these vignettes and scenes and put people into these contexts and say, hey, this is a classroom in Guatemala, what it looks like. This is where kids sleep in the slums in Nairobi, and being able to take them through these things, it really woke a lot of kids' eyes up when, and there was everything from what they could see, what they could smell, what they could hear. Yeah, it was pretty amazing, and it definitely humbled to win an award on that, and the stories that we were able to capture from different, even adults, that had never traveled, that have gone through there, like the parents and everything like that. It really opened their eyes that, man, there's a whole nother world outside the United States.
Well, so I appreciate you using, well, I'll call it virtual worlds to get people in touch with the real world, right? Most people might not think that's how that works. Um, we in Hollywood, I think, are freaking out a little bit right now because of things like OpenAI's Sora, which, anything you can imagine, in a sense, AI can give you, maybe not immediate, but a pretty quickly they can give you an approximation. If you want to bring woolly mammoths back to life, if you want a crab crawling with a light on a beach. You can do that. And for us, it was weird when we saw these pictures of like kind of imaginary Tokyo or imaginary Hong Kong that had the look and feel of like an expensive movie, and it's done, almost instantaneously. Tyler Perry, when he saw it, said, "Well, then I don't need to build a studio. I don't need, to create space in Atlanta for more production." And so there was this idea that's going to cost us jobs. Are you worried about your job, your niche, getting invaded by, I'll just call it in a sense, cheap or instantaneous AI? You've got all these years of expertise that you've built,
Mhm.
and then some kid can come along and be like, "Oh, I can build a world too. Give me a little of this, give me a little of that."
Yeah, yeah, I think it's there's several different layers to it, and the idea that you can have master craftsmen be replaced by a technology that really is only about an inch deep doesn't really scare us too much. Because what is the story being told ultimately is the thing, and uh, And we really are big fans of the human condition and the idea that individuals have opportunities to tell a story. And we see it as a mass democratization of being able to let more people tell their story in more compelling ways. But in the end, I mean, Steve Jobs said, like, most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. They're the ones who cast the vision and the values for the generation to come. The most important story I mentioned earlier is the story that we tell ourselves. The second most important story is the story that we connect with our families with. It doesn't matter about my businesses or any of those things. At the end of the day, I care about, my kids, and then the legacy of values that they're carrying on, faith, family, friends, and how we actually circle those things around. The tools that technology is bringing us, really, I'm excited because it enables us to get more done a lot faster. This stuff, we use AI for a lot of prototyping, but it doesn't really give us the direct answers we need. It doesn't give us the control that we want as storytellers. I don't know if any of you guys were little kids and used to do little productions in your backyard and you try and direct your friends around, or anything like that. There's something about real-time production, interacting with other people that you can get feedback on, that we know AI is trying to catch up with, and eventually it's going to get there. But the use of it, though, is, I mean, we kind of look back at history, like, photography used to have to have big equipment and all this stuff in photo studios, and Kodak comes along and makes a portable camera. It didn't get rid of photography. And really the core product for Kodak was creating that Kodak moment, and they created a whole industry around telling moms that, hey, to be a good mother, you have to take your family vacation photos, capture those memories of the birthdays and all those things. And that pathway built this multi-billion-dollar industry, and they literally invented the digital camera and missed the moment to capture that because they thought their product was film, not making the Kodak moment. And we sometimes get mixed up between the outcome versus the output. And the output is great, stunning visuals, but the outcome is, how does that move you emotionally? And not a lot of AI has moved me emotionally yet. I think eventually it could get there, especially when it can start taking human direction. And we're working on a few of those things right now. But yeah, I think history tends to repeat itself. I mean, it's like, Kodak invented the graphical user interface, but they were hung up on paper. But the way that we look at word processors, it doesn't eliminate writers, it just enables them. So when we look at these tools, it really is just enabling us to move a lot faster, where we would have spent time before looking through Pinterest or looking through photography boards, doing all this stuff. I can actually pull a mood board together with AI, hand it to an actual concept artist, and they're able to pull something together way closer to what I was actually thinking of than like 50 prompts to an AI image generator. And yeah, if hopefully that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. So for me, working in Hollywood, I'm intrigued. We're worried, there was the big strikes, et cetera, that happened, with writers, because we're worried about being replaced. So these questions of consent, things being taken off the internet
Mhm.
without consent, these questions of copyright, who owns it, and then really compensation, right, which was at the heart of that struggle. I found three kind of weird instances that you can see that apply in the movies that have been nominated for Oscars, right? So the Oscars are coming up next weekend, and so you've got The Brutalist, right? It's about an architect, Hungarian immigrant to America, and both of the actors, in post production, they use something called respeecher
Yeah.
to smooth out, their Hungarian, to make their Hungarian
Mhm.
accents better, and yet, Adrian Brody's nominated for an Oscar, right, as for best acting, but is it his voice? It's his voice
Mhm.
enhanced, right? So is the best performance the combination of best performance with a little AI to kind of smooth out the edges? Um, I think the same thing will go on, when you're talking about special effects. The Foundry used nuke technology in Dune to create, the blue eyes on, on the characters there. And then a last one that I found is in a complete unknown, the Bob Dylan story that Timothy Chalamet is fantastic in. They used Revise to help some of the stunt doubles or the folks in the second unit to make it look more like Timothy Chalamet when he's walking down the street when he wasn't actually there. They were using a body double or somebody, to sub in for him. Well, now they can kind of merge, right? Virtual Timothy, or take a little more of his body shape and alter that in post. So, what do you think about this? I don't know, I'll just call it the tweaking kind of versions around these edges here.
Yeah, yeah, it's a slippery slope, and I mean, and it's been talked about for years now, even with music, with auto tune or different electronics things, and it is definitely there are purists who are like, no, no, it has to be whatever it is, but ultimately we're like, yeah, whatever kind of moves things along, and and there are jobs that are being replaced, especially on retranslating to other languages. That's a completely other thing of localization that can now be done at a fraction of the cost, and it's putting the people who used to translate out of business. Well, productive humans will find something else to do, and they're finding other things to do, and I have friends in that industry, and they're actually jumping into other aspects of other things that need to be done, and they find themselves useful. It's all the all the blacksmiths and horseshoe makers that went out of business when the car came along. There's going to be other things to do. How we do awards and all this stuff, I'm not really big on the awards to begin with, but I'm like, we'll have to rethink through those, and think through, well, what actually is connecting with people, what's actually helping humanity. But yeah, hanging on to old ways just to hang on to old ways, that's I'm not, by default, I'm not wired that way. But I do understand 60% of people resist change, and I understand that, yeah, that there's a lot of loss of the old ways.
Yeah. You guys also have a company, like a special effects company called Ozone, right? So
Mhm.
you're creating 3D characters, and you're enabling people to kind of bring them to life or manipulate them at I don't know, I'll say a much faster pace, right? So
Yeah.
that's viewed as a plus. But if you're a 3D modeler builder, again, it's like if you don't shift with this technology, you're going to be left behind. True.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And especially when we look at the future of being the goal everyone's going after is real time. When you look at the Matrix or Ready Player One, it's this real time interactivity. So even being able to direct an actor in real time is really helpful. Animation, you've never really had that. Mark Andrews has pioneered a lot of different technologies, and he's partnered with us on this, and the ability to give real time direction to actors that are doing animation, and being able to capture animation in real time is a lot of fun. And then yeah, and the whole segue then is into AI when you add the element of being able to give AI real time direction. So you have that character walking down the Tokyo street, and you say, oh, no, no, I need you to walk a little faster, or I need you to slow down here. I need you to do this. And being able to give that real time interaction to give the direction you want for your story is really powerful. So we're having a bit of fun working in that space right now.
And would you, so I'm a educator, right? I've got hundreds of kids who want to be, in film,
Mhm.
gaming, animation. Um,
Mhm.
I wrote the book Honest Creativity because I think they started freaking out. Like they were just like, I'm going to be replaced. Why should I practice? Why do I need to
Mhm.
do
Oh.
any basic skills? What do you say to these folks who, it's like, what does 10,000 hours mean if,
Mhm.
the machine can do it in 30 seconds? How would you motivate young people?
Yeah, it's really sad. I think they've been brought up in this world that there's one answer. It's in the back of the book, a very assembly line approach to things. And when I look back, yeah, Steve Jobs is just yeah, he's not a perfect guy, but yeah, I think there's a lot of brilliant things about him. But one of my favorite things is how he dropped out of college, but for the next 2 years would continue to attend college and just audit classes that he liked. And one of those classes randomly was a calligraphy class. And in that calligraphy class, he learned about lettering and the relationships between the letters. And years later, he'd be working on the Macintosh and the graphical user interface, and they were laying out type, he brought the question of fonts and how they are being brought together. And the idea, the engineers were like, oh yeah, IBM uses fonts on typewriters. It's all monospace. He's all, no, it's not about monospacing. It's about the relationship between characters, how you bring it in. And the lessons that he learned from that calligraphy class, ability to apply it to modern technology, literally gave birth to typesetting as we know it. And it was that incidental little thing. And what happens with master craftsmen when you have 10,000 hours of work, you intuitively know how to do things and how to pull things off because you've mastered it. Um, and people who haven't mastered it, they will never know. And these things those details will just go right over their head. And AI as we know it right now, it's combed the internet. And it's like the internet as the source of truth is so flawed at this point. So what we have experienced is even though it gets us an answer in 30 seconds, it's about a good of quality answer as an entry level intern. So even though it looks really good, what is that image really communicating? What is the balance of it? Okay, yeah, it's balance rule of thirds and has the basics down, but does it have the nuances that a true master would actually bring? Not even close. And yeah, eventually, again, I think it could get there, especially gone unfettered. I think, make no mistake, I'm not such a fan of AI that I'm like, oh yeah, we have nothing to worry about. We do have to be concerned about. But for us, it's just challenging us to be better. And in the end, I guess I have this faith in humanity and just the complexity of how our brains work and our ability to see and craft and connect stories is that we will advance. And these tools help push us to advance, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I advocate in the book for I call it HI, right? It's human ingenuity, human imagination, right? That will, I don't think, ever go out of style.
Mhm.
It will still be the distinguisher, right? The thing that sets you apart. Um, I did see this week, or was it last week? Microsoft published a study that they did with Carnegie Mellon amongst knowledge workers and using AI, and they actually determined that knowledge workers are getting both lazy and less creative,
Mhm.
kind of the more they use it. Like they're not even
Mhm.
using their own brains, or their own creative capacities. They're kind of sliding by with the quick answers. How do you resist that? Is that a temptation? You know,
Oh, yeah. I mean, but I think just like hard times bring out people's characters. When someone has the ability just to kind of get by really quickly, then they'll let that. What it's done for our team is, in reflecting back, I mean, we only have so many hours in the day. That's the most precious thing to us. And if there is something that doesn't really matter, we can get away and we'll use a little bit a chat GP or generative AI image for a concept. We just try to plaster all over. Hey, this is just a quick 15-minute response. So I can move on to this other thing that I really care about. But especially within our company, we're working on things that we're really passionate about. And when you're passionate about something, we're not looking just how to cut a corner and give a deliverable. We're actually looking at like how do we make sure this really comes across and connects. So I think being able to be surrounded by people that are really passionate and that really care make a huge difference. And that's throughout my work history when I worked at IBM and Johnson Johnson, the corporate world, and then even on to working with a lot of different creative agencies. The thing that made a difference was people that cared. And whether you're taking it's like using a calculator. It's like if you don't know the fundamentals of math, if the calculator gives you an incorrect answer, you wouldn't know. Actually, what's funny is, well, yeah, the other week I did something and it was like, oh yeah, I noticed I was almost married 10,000 days. And then I asked Chat GPT and it gave me an outlandish number. Like instead of 10,000, it was 13,000. I'm like, wait, what? And it actually gave all the backup. And I looked right there, plain as day, like 9 times 360. It was like it was wrong, but it says it so confidently. And unless you're able to really look and have context to know that AI is on track, I mean, if you're willing to blindly follow it, sure, but you have to care to make sure that you can test it back and apply it.
well, I'm finding students who've had so many, I'll say virtual internships and
Mm,
assignments where, or worked for whole summers. Even my own daughter spent a whole summer working for a company with people that she never was in the same room for. And I found her saying for her next job, she wanted to be in a physical space, with people, um, actually,
mhm.
in proximity where you could bounce ideas off each other in real time. You guys have multiple offices, you're working with clients around the world. So your reach is better than ever before because of technology. Do you find yourselves hungering for that human connection? Do you find clients wanting you to be in proximity to them? All of that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, ultimately, I'm a big believer in the 80% of effective communication is nonverbal. And even right now, like Zoom is good. We can see each other. We can get those micro expressions. But it's still not as good as being in person. You can see their whole body recoil or lean in. And when we're interacting, the reason why I'm in DC right now is because I have to be face to face with our clients for a lot of our work to make it effective. Only so much can be done virtually. What we usually find is tactical work can be done virtually or independently, but definitely innovative work, collaborative collaboration is really key to innovating. And some people can innovate on their own, and that's great. For us, it is about getting people into the room and getting best idea wins and being able to be passionate and talking things through and making sure that we're tackling the problem. It's not personal issues. All that happens when you're face to face. And we try to do that as much as possible. But we are a hybrid company, and it is really challenging, and we feel it and we know. And teams usually gather more frequently than the whole company does, but we have a handful of people that come into our main studios because they really like being connected face to face. And it is and we actually have had interns that have tried to do it all remote versus the ones that are in person, and the ones in person by far get up to speed with our culture and with expertise and everything like that way faster than those who are just purely remote.
Um, well, I feel like AI and faith is always trying to figure out what are the impacts and the implications for the human to try and bring the ethical into all this. There's a lot of great comments that are coming in on this discussion right now about cognition, knowledge, um, how we're being shifted. Are we being shifted? How do we resist? How do we learn through handwriting? Um, you do you feel, I sometimes feel like we're this weird hybrid generation that like knows the old ways, where we actually had to manipulate the physical world and, write things down. And this new world of like where they may not ever have to kind of, not do something electronically. Um, and yet I see students very much interested in the physical world. It's almost like they're more interested in LPs
Mhm.
than they are in MP3s, right? Um,
Mhm.
so do you feel like the physical world, you're building physical worlds, is the physical world making a comeback? Is tangible things, going to become more special, rare, and valuable? What do you think?
Yeah, it's funny because memory ultimately there's a whole cycle here as far as like stories. It's all about perception then begets into memories, right? Moments make memories. What are memories? Well, memories become more indelible the more senses you engage, and this is throughout human history. This is what you see, what you smell, what you touch, what you feel. When you meet somebody, it's really not so much of what they said to you as much as how did they make you feel. So even when we engage these spaces, how does it make you feel? And there's constantly been this cycle of things. When you look at architecture and the whole idea of brutalist and or modernism and it was like this minimalism and trying to ship things back, and then people realize, wait a second, there's actually a gap in how it's making me feel because it's not connecting emotionally. One of my favorite quotes, and this is probably out of context, but the whole idea of art is the deception, or is the most beautiful deception. When you look at a painting of the ocean, you're not looking at the ocean. You're looking at something that's evoking the emotions of looking at the ocean. And when we look at our craft as storytellers, and when I look at the greatest storyteller of all time, yeah, Jesus, when he came to this earth, he didn't come just as a healer. He didn't come just as a teacher. He actually came as a storyteller. Now, he didn't just teach the scriptures on the steps of the temple or the synagogue. He told stories along the way to connect people to those scriptural truths. And to the point in which the disciples even asked him, like, what's with all the stories? Why not just state the facts? Just get right to there. Like, hey, just give them the MP3. Don't give them the LP to hang on to. But the reality is that the stories is actually what opens their eyes and opens their ears and opens their minds. And this idea that there is a father out there who will take his son back, that was totally outside of traditional norms when the son has left him in this terrible prodigal way. It was something that cast hope within people. When you look at a younger generation, they realize, oh, it's more than just listening to the music. It's if I can touch the music, if I can feel it, if I can actually go to a concert. Some of the largest gatherings in human history are happening right now around digital content. And whether it's concerts or whether it's Comic-Con or BlizzCon or any of those things, it's all bringing people together in that human connection. So I think people have always done that. There's times when something's novel and it comes out, and when it's an iPod and they can have it, that convenience, that's definitely a great thing. But when people really fall in love with an artist, they dive into their story and they learn about them. And I mean, one of my kids' favorite bands, 21 Pilots, and there's a whole story and lore behind all their albums that go into this whole thing of mental health. And when I took them to a concert, and it was just mind blowing. They had like 40% of concert goers had like duct tape on them. I was like, what is going on? Well, that's a part of the jumpsuit lore and this whole thing that they fell into. And so they're going to make it tactical and they're going to bring it into themselves. And I think it's not that it's coming back in style. I don't think it ever left. It's just the direction of it. It manifests itself in different ways. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And 21 Pilots was one of my daughter's favorite bands as well. And
Yeah.
maybe for similar
Yeah.
reasons that it was harder for me to get in touch with, you know?
Yeah.
And so you're
Yeah.
starting with this experience of what you're hearing on the radio or on
Mhm.
streaming. But then you want that physical experience with other people in proximity to people who have had a similar thing,
Mm.
right? So you come together
Yeah.
for the communal.
Greg, why don't you tell us a bit about honest creativity? Why don't you tell us a bit about the book? Because you've mentioned it a couple of times. I mentioned it in the introduction as well, but you haven't told us a lot about the book itself, what it's about, and you did mention a bit of why you wrote it. But I think it would be very interesting to know a bit more. You also in that book, you explored different foundations of these human innovations in the age of AI. So I think that it would be great for everyone to learn a bit more about that book as well.
Well, I think for me, I've taught creativity to literally like thousands of kids over the years. I mean, this gray hair that I'm rocking is earned. That's not fake. That's not just bleach. Um, and I tried to think at this moment when creativity is being questioned, or when people might think that they can, or in some ways it's being supercharged, perhaps by AI. What are the core principles, of human creativity that we can lean back on? And so I do go back to who we are as people, right? And so much creativity begins with like fear, longing, loss, all of those things, that none of us can seem to escape, and leaning into our humanity as a bit of a secret sauce that computers may struggle with, right? Because they can sort of scrape the internet and figure out, oh, these are poems about grief, or these are songs about loss. But can they give us any new takes on grief and longing if a computer hasn't experienced that? They can project, but they maybe haven't lived it. And so trying to lean into our pain, our shortcomings, our aches as a bit of a superpower in this new age of AI, I think is maybe hopefully good news to people who are like, well, all I got is brokenness and confusion and questions. I was like, okay, great. Because if the purpose of art is to connect with other people and feel less alone, less crazy, less isolated, well, then let's lean into that. And then let's figure out what the new processes might look like. So you're still going to start with your own questions, your own doubts, your own fears. But then you'll have new processes. And maybe AI, I mean, Peter's talked a lot about collaboration in their company. A lot of people are going to end up collaborating with AI as a starting point, or to get ideas generated, or to get an iteration and get a quick idea of what it might look like. So from people to processes, and then also what the products are, as that third thing. And a lot of times I think with artists, they fall short. They don't know how to market themselves. They don't know what to do with this thing they've created. And maybe that's okay. Maybe there's going to be more objects and physical objects of beauty that will just exist as gifts to each other. And the gift economy may be growing. But I also want to help people understand that the new distribution possibilities allow you to distribute your art, distribute your message, access communities. We've talked about virtual worlds, virtual communities, and to expand than ever before. So trying to turn people's fears into possibilities, I feel like, is at the root of just being honest about those aches and those pains. And that will distinguish us in the creative marketplace. I don't know if that makes sense with your experience, Peter. What do you think?
There's several different aspects to just how we connect, and using AI as a tool versus letting it just run amok and not realizing what you're actually collaborating with or putting yourself into. I think it is, there's a whole set, like, rabbit hole I could go down, actually, as I'm thinking about that, like, because and that's the thing, is when we look at right now what's funded or what's pooled AI, it's not the best of the best. It's just the mass of everything. And I think what we really fight for is trying to make sure we have the best information to convey our ideas as effectively as possible. And AI is a tool for that right at this point. But yeah, we're definitely skeptical of just taking whatever we can from it.
So I think this has been wonderful and quite a success. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you all.
Right.
Thank you so much,
Keep up
everyone.
the great work, Pablo, David, and team.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Stay tuned to listen to more recordings and interviews with experts from around the world. In the meantime, follow and rate our podcast on your favorite podcast platform and share with your friends. Don't forget to follow us on our social media as well. We're on LinkedIn and X. Thank you for joining us today.